This is the Venturing Angler Podcast. I'm Tim Harden. In this episode, I'll be talking with Doug McKnight of Yellow Dog Flyfishing Adventures about fly fishing in the Bahamas. Let's chat with Doug. All right, we're here with Doug McKnight from Yellow Dog Flyfishing Adventures. Doug, welcome to the Venturing Angler Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Tim.
So you're the program director for the Bahamas, and I've been wanting to chat with you for some time about the Bahamas, and I'm glad we waited because, now it's one of the, I don't know if I want to say one of the few, but one of the places where anglers can now travel. So before we jump into the Bahamas generally, what's going on most recently with the Bahamas?
Yeah, so, 1st of November, they went up to another stage of being open, and you can go. We've got, anglers traveling pretty regularly right now, and you just need to take a PCR swab test within 5 days of your first travel day. So that's really been the only kind of tricky part, just because not everybody can get their test back that quickly. But, if we can pull it all off, that part of it, travel is, fairly easy once you get that health visa. As far as getting in and out, some of the airline schedules, like to some of the out islands has changed a little bit, but nothing that would make it prohibitive to, plan a trip. And, we had some tough weather last week with, Hurricane Eta, roaming around through the Caribbean. It was, down in Belize, but, spread some really wet, cloudy and windy weather all the way, up even into the Bahamas. So, but this week looks really good, and fishing will probably be great down there.
Good. And so it's, at the time of recording this, it's just about mid-November. But are there anglers already heading down there and taking trips?
Definitely. Not tons of them, but, a steady stream. And, really just the past 2 weeks is when we've had, some of our first travelers down there since, we had a few down there over the summer when the Bahamas was still open. And, but yeah, this is pretty much, the first anglers since March that have been fishing.
And as far as I've heard, there's no problems to report. It's, aside from getting the testing, it's pretty smooth sailing and, maybe even good fishing.
Yeah, so far so good,
And how do, this is also a time when the COVID numbers aren't necessarily ideal, and so it's good to see that the country thinks that they can, and airlines too, can manage things right now and keep people safe.
Yeah, I think so. And just, with airlines and stuff, I think doing a much better job. Hopefully they can, continue, this success moving forward and make it smooth and make anglers feel comfortable about traveling.
That's terrific. So, I've been to the Bahamas once. I've been down. Abaco Lodge is no longer around, but I went to Abaco Lodge a couple of years ago, and I'm fairly familiar with the Bahamas and aware that it's not the biggest country, but there's a bit of diversity to the fishing down there, and so I'd love to chat about the Bahamas. Its general areas and what makes each area so special. And not sure quite how to dive into that, but first of all, what do you love about the Bahamas?
Really there's something there for everybody, whether you're planning, your first saltwater flats trip ever, or, you've been everywhere and done that. There's something in the Bahamas, tailored around bonefish that would appeal to just about anybody. Anywhere from anglers looking to catch their first bonefish ever, all the way up to anglers, who want to chase, double-digit fish. There's some really large bonefish. in the Bahamas. I mean, it's truly one of the best bone fishing destinations in the entire world. And that's not, just all that's down there. There's certainly, other species to target, but bonefish are the main one, kind of across the board in the Bahamas. There's a few places that stand out, that maybe offer a little bit more in terms of diversity of species, i.e. tarpon and permit. But it's really, all about quality bone fishing for sure.
Yeah, so I've heard it referred to as the bone fishing capital of the world, and just like Surf City, I'm sure other places claim that too. But I think more than any other fish, I think of the Bahamas first, or think of bonefish first with the Bahamas.
Yeah, I mean they got it on their one of their coins. They've got bonefish. That's how high regard they hold it.
Nice, I didn't know that. So what are I know that the bone fishing isn't the same throughout the Bahamas. How would you break down regions and then describe the fishing of each region?
Yeah, well, I mean, you could say the northern Bahamas, middle Bahamas, or central Bahamas, and then the southern Bahamas. And they've all certainly have their similarities and certainly some differences, outside of geographics. The northern Bahamas, which we would consider to be Grand Bahama and Abaco, maybe down to the north tip of Andros, would be considered the northern Bahamas. Let's start out with Grand Bahama, since it's the furthest north. Grand Bahama is a fantastic fishery. It's one of the larger fisheries. It comes in it comes in second in terms of geographic size to Andros, which is the largest one. So it's a big area. Not tons of lodges on Grand Bahama, and in fact, with Hurricane Dorian, some lodges were lost down there. The famous Deepwater Cay was completely destroyed. East End Lodge, also mostly destroyed. And then we've got, Pelican Bay, H2O Bonefish and Greg Vincent's place, which is operational right now, and then North Riding Point Club. And then there's probably a couple others that I'm missing that we don't work with. But it's a wonderful fishery, and it's a good spot for numbers. There's some very, very large bonefish there as well, and it's actually one of the better spots to find some seasonal permit and occasionally a tarpon. But it's a really cool spot for fishing. There's a nice mix of wade fishing available there. A bunch of stuff that's too soft to wade, but it's a big area, and what few operations are left down there right now. I mean, they weren't even bumping into each other before the hurricane, and now there's even less competition. And I just can't wait to get down there and fish, because those fish are probably not going to get fished to for a year and a half.
Yeah, and it's great to hear that H2O is back at it. Is there any news about the other lodges that were taken down?
Yeah, North Riding Point, they were just kind of right on the the far side of the destruction. They did not get just some very minor damage, so they were operational last year as well. And then East End Lodge, they will be open by March, possibly a little bit earlier, but we've already started taking some reservations, for March, and they're all the way out on the far east end of Grand Bahama, right near where Deepwater Cay was. And it looks like nothing is happening with Deepwater Cay. In fact, from what I've heard, they haven't even, cleaned up anything out there yet, which would be a monumental task. I heard that, that they got quoted like, damn near $1 million just to clean up the island. So it was pretty bad over there.
And so south of that is
Abaco. Yeah, Abaco was also, really impacted by Dorian, particularly the northern half of Abaco, where, Abaco Lodge was. Abaco is a really cool fishery. Probably the most well-known spot is the famous Marls, which is a huge, kind of backcountry area, filled with bonefish flats and mangroves and, lots and lots and lots of bonefish, a pretty good size area to fish with very little development in there. Not the best spot for wade fishing, but a solid spot for numbers of fish. Fish that average, 2 to 5 pounds. And once you get to the deeper edge of the Marls, heading to the west, where you get around some deeper water, you'll find some bigger bonefish, and it's a pretty decent permit spot too. And then down to, the south of Abaco, that's a wonderful area to fish. One of my favorites, for sure, right around Sandy Point and Moores Island and Gorda Key. There's good numbers of fish down there, and there's some absolute brutes of bonefish. It's one of the better permit spots for sure. We on Abaco, we work with the Delphi Club, and then Kelly Gallup's new Sandy Point Lodge, which we're really excited about. He's going to be, down there right in Sandy Point proper. So, very close run to some really fishy areas like Cross Harbor, which a few years ago was a new national park that they added, protecting it from development. And then, a fairly short run over to, Moores and Gorda Key, which, for a long time was a big secret spot for, great big bonefish and permit, with consistency. The central Bahamas, the big feature there for bone fishermen certainly is Andros Island, which is, the largest island in the Bahamas. And it also happens to be some of the very best, bone fishing that you could find anywhere in the Bahamas. And we send more anglers to Andros than any other area in the Bahamas. Part of that is that there is a lot of infrastructure for traveling anglers down there. In other words, there's quite a few lodges, and they're all pretty well spaced out. That's one thing that we hear from clients. There's that many lodges, boy, it's got to be a zoo. Just to give you an example, the bight system of Andros, the waterways that slice through Andros from east to west. For example, that north bight, you could probably fit 200 skiffs in there, and you might not see each other all day. It's that big. So it's a huge island and is surrounded by bonefish flats. It's not, just one spot on the island where you have flats. I mean, literally the entire thing is covered with bonefish flats. East Coast, West Coast, north and south. Some of the finest bonefish and habitat that you can find. It's also big enough to where there are places that do not get fished, hardly ever. They're just so far away, from lodges, that you'd need to camp out in order to really fish them. So that's one of the big intrigues, at least for me, and certainly a lot of people, about Andros, is there are places that have never been fished. I mean, there's some serious inland fisheries that you'd need to bushwhack into them, through poison wood and brambles and thick pine forest to even get to them. So there's fish there still that have never ever seen a fly. It's also home to an unbelievable group of guides on Andros. It's kind of the kids follow in their father's footsteps and become guides, and there are guides there that are, we're getting on, 3, even 4 generations of bonefish guides there. So it's really in their blood, and, there's not a lot of development on Andros. So, anglers going there and flats fishing, that's who visits Andros. So, they're very welcoming of anglers on Andros for sure.
And you can really do some backcountry saltwater fly fishing, and you're exploring as much as you would anywhere in the world.
Absolutely. And there are a number of lodges that we work with on Andros. Some of them, most of the settlements are on the east coast of Andros, that face east Oceanside. And then, some of them are way up north. Why don't I just go over, some of the geography of Andros, starting at the north. Up there, the main feature for anglers is an area called the Jolters Cays, and it's a big flats complex on the very north tip of Andros, and it is absolutely gorgeous up there, white sand bottoms. It's one of the better spots to wade fish, on Andros. So if you're a wade fishing enthusiast, the Jolters is a great spot. Great place for numbers of fish. Fish in the 2 to 6 pound range are fairly common, or not fairly common. They're everywhere. And then, we do see some larger fish sprinkled in here and there up in the Jolters. And at the very north tip of the Jolters, there is a big permit flat up there where they, with some regularity at least, see good numbers of permit. They'll follow around stingrays up there too. And then there's a couple of big cuts, channel cuts in the Jolters where, you'll find some tarpon in there for sure. Most of what we're seeing in terms of the tarpon permit fishing in the Bahamas is really more around the warmer months, not that they completely disappear during the cooler months, middle of winter, but we see more of them, kind of May through October and into November when we do have that elevated water temperature. And then as we move south on Andros, we get to a little town called Fresh Creek, and that's where a lot of anglers fly from Nassau and get to quite a few of these lodges in the northern part, say the northern half of Andros. And Fresh Creek is a wonderful fishery, and that's not the only, there's several creeks that, drain from the mainland out into the ocean, heading east, and you can go back in some of these creeks for a hell of a long ways and find some really quality fishing. And then the entire eastern side of Andros, is protected by a barrier reef. So there's not much surf on the beaches of Andros, and that, bodes well for anglers because guess what you got? You got some oceanside flats, and there's a number of places that we work with on Andros where on the east coast of Andros proper that you can literally walk out your door and find bonefish. So it's a good spot for, DIY anglers. Obviously guided fishing is huge. There's a number of operations on Andros as well that, cater to couples and families and are not all about bone fishing, but there's great bone fishing there. So, if you're looking to take your wife or your family and you want to get away and do some fishing and have your wife and family taken care of, that exists on Andros as well. And then, as we get into the bites of Andros, those waterways that slice through Andros, that is a tremendous area to fish. They're big, they're interlaced with tons of little keys and, adjoining flats and channels, and it's just an absolutely enormous area. And the other thing that's really cool about the bites of Andros is the way the tides fill up. They start at the east and, that water moves inland. So the guides can chase an ideal tide throughout the day. You're not just, dealing with, 2 highs and 2 lows per day. It sounds crazy, but you can start, say you've got a low tide, and you're on the east side of the bites near where it hits the ocean. and tide's coming up and you're having really good fishing, fish coming in on the incoming tide to feed on the flats, and the tide gets high, and maybe the fishing slows down a little bit, or the fish have moved inland. The guides, you can move into the bite, say maybe 10, 15 minutes, and you've got that whole scenario all over again. Plays out again, move further in. So the guides can really play the tides, to your advantage. So you're never really caught in an off tide where, maybe the water's real high and you're waiting for the fish to come out of the mangroves, and, it's been 2-3 hours and you can hear them in there, but you can't get to them. So that's one of the big pluses of fishing the bites. And, just like a lot of places on Andros, there's something in there for everybody. It's a great spot for numbers, all the way up to, some scary large bonefish, fish that are over 30 inches long. And, you always talk to the guides and locals and stuff, and they tell stories about, giant bonefish that were 20 pounds. I don't know if they were that big, but, they're definitely, 12-pound plus bonefish in that area.
Wow.
And then as we head to the south on South Andros, as you get down towards the south tip of the island, we start seeing, a lot more water kind of flowing through the mainland, and it just kind of trickles into, a bunch of islands, and it is fabulous bone fishing down there. Like the Jolters, it's an unbelievable spot to wade. Just about everywhere you look, on South Andros is very firm and very wadeable. So when we get, folks, they call Yellow Dog and say, hey, I really want to go wade fishing for bonefish. I don't want to fish from the boat, and we're talking about Andros. Certainly South Andros and North Andros come up very commonly as a really good suggestion. I would say, generally speaking, it's more about numbers of, 2 to 6 pound fish rather than an area that holds, a lot of trophy bonefish, but there are some really big bonefish down there too, particularly in some of the creeks, that drain the mainland that you can, the guides can go in there and pull away in there. There's some really nice bonefish in there too. And then the other place that we should talk about for Andros is the west side of Andros, which just about all of it is a big national park with no development. And, from most of the lodges, it's a pretty good run, running through the bites, running through the north bite, middle bite, or south bite to get to the west side. If you're, say, running from Big Charlie's Lodge, which is in, Cargill Creek, right on the corner of the North Bight. From Charlie's Lodge to get to, the opening to the west side, you're looking at about an hour and 5-minute run, running full out. So it's a commitment, to get over there. But once you get over there, it's an incredibly special place. It is definitely the land of big bonefish. Not that there's not numbers over there. There's definitely numbers of, your average size Andros bone over there. But it is one of the premier places to find some larger bonefish. And, one of the bigger attractions, particularly during, the warmer months, or, when you do have nice, warm, settled weather, it's a hell of a spot to find tarpon and permit. When things are going well, you'll see them every day.
That's terrific. Actually, now that I think about it, the last time I was down there, there was a group that kept getting up early and heading out to the west side to try to find some big permit, and I think they did. But I was enjoying the bone fishing.
Yeah, and one of the cool things about the west side is it's a lot of places when you tell your guide that, like, hey, I want a tarpon fish today, or hey, I want a permit fish today, that's what you go and do, and you live with what you get, whether you find any or not. With the west side of Andros, I would say that you're chasing bonefish all day and you bump into tarpon and permit, kind of narrow shoreline flats that is kind of, perfect bonefish habitat, but the boat is either in or within sight of tarpon and permit depth, kind of more of that, 3 to 6 foot deep water. And so you see more of them. So, you'll be pulling along, chasing bonefish, catching bonefish, and then, you see your guide tense up and be like, grab that permit rod or grab that tarpon rod. I've got a laid up tarpon here, or a pair of them, coming out of a creek. And, the tarpon on Andros are fairly honest fish. They don't see tons of pressure, tons of traffic. Like I said, it's a big commitment to get over there. And, you make a good presentation to, a tarpon on Andros, probably better than a 50-50 shot. He's going to bite the fly, which is high for tarpon fishing. They're certainly not easy. Permit are a different story. They're as dishonest on Andros as they are anywhere else.
Well, they live up to the reputation everywhere then. That's great. And then south of Andros, where are we looking?
We're looking, places that we send, quite a few people in the southern islands would be Long Island and then Crooked Island, which I would say are, in the southern Bahamas, well south of Andros. And, Long Island is a cool one. There's not a ton of stuff going on there. We work with 2 different lodges over there, Stella Maris and Dead Man's Cay. And the fishing is wonderful down there. Not very much in terms of traffic, not too much in terms of lodges down there. Good solid spot for nice Bahamas bonefish. It's a good spot for sure. Lots of good wade fishing. So if you're a wade fishing enthusiast, lots of hard bottoms down there. And then Crooked is certainly one of my personal favorites. It might be right up there at the top in terms of diversity of fish species in the Bahamas. In terms of, tarpon, permits, even some snook down there, as well as having solid bone fishing. And the other thing that's cool about, the southern Bahamas, it doesn't always, work out the way we say it, but it is an ideal destination for a midwinter trip, just because you are so far south down there that, where, say the northern Bahamas gets, pretty regular cold fronts that can, impact your trip in terms of weather and fishing. A lot of them don't make it all the way down to that part of the Bahamas. So, if you are looking at middle of the winter trip, you can sometimes hedge your bets, in terms of weather by heading further south,
I'm glad you brought up weather. That was and seasons. That was one of the things I was going to bring up next. I've asked a couple of people who spend a lot of time there when their favorite time of the year is, and I get different answers. What about for you, and why?
That's a great question. For me personally, I try and head down in the summer. It's a time where I can kind of get away from my job a little bit and not have to worry about, stuff being covered here at the office. But that's the time when we see kind of warmer water temperatures. And, a lot of times that will translate into more tarpon and permit shots, which I'm certainly all about, in addition to, chasing bonefish. But, honestly, that's a question we get here almost on a daily basis. When's the best time to go and go to the Bahamas and go fishing? And the honest answer is anytime. The bone fishing in the Bahamas is a year-round thing. The biggest thing that we see in terms of our success or failure, in terms of how many fish we see and how well we do, is the weather that we get when we're on our trip, regardless of the time of year. You can pick out, for a while, and to some extent even still is, a lot of anglers are gravitating towards March and April, maybe even May, because they think those are the best weather months. And, we've been in this long enough to where, yeah, the weather can be great in April and May, but it can also be crummy. You know, I remember being down on Andros Island fishing with a guy named Marvin Miller, he's awesome, and we were down there in January, and we got hit with some pretty crummy weather. Not enough to where we weren't catching fish and doing well, but kind of murked up the west side with a west, kind of a rare west wind, northwest wind. And he was telling me about how good December was, and oh man, we were on the west side, we were seeing tarpon every time we went down there, we were getting them, just going nuts. So there is some seasonality to the weather in the Bahamas, from winter, spring, summer, and fall, but not drastically. I would say that the biggest thing, between the four different seasons down there, wintertime we have our coolest water temperatures, which is not bad for bonefishing. Bonefish don't mind that slightly cooler water. And what they tend to do is break up from great big schools. So you have more, for example, in the jolters, you go up there in the middle of the summer, you'll be pulling along with your guide, and a guide will look up. It's like, okay, I got him, and be looking like I don't see him, and he'll be like, okay, you see up there about 500 yards in front of us, just kind of that big gray blob. And you look and you're like, oh yeah, I see that color. And he's like, that's all bonefish. And you go up there and you throw in a great big school of, 1,000 fish of all different sizes. There's, a pair of 12-pounders in there, but you're never going to catch them. Because, Mr. 3-pound bodyguard gets it every time, and then the school, spooks and leaves. But you go up there in the wintertime in that cooler water, all those schools are broken apart, and there's a group here, there's singles and doubles over there, there's 20, there's 15, all over the flat. So, the winter months, we do see that more in areas like the jolters. Instead of seeing these, great big schools of fish like we do in the warmer months, they're all broken apart and, maybe a little bit more action, a little bit more interesting fishing. Spring and fall, outside of hurricane season, which we've had an incredibly record-breakingly busy one, are kind of the, what a lot of people consider the Goldilocks zone. It's not too warm. It's not too cool. It's just right. And that's why those months are popular. And then, the summertime is when we see our warmest weather, and the bonefish in a lot of places does hold up really well. I mean, you can go down there in the middle of August and, do really well. And a lot of people think, oh man, it's got to be just ungodly hot in say on Andros in August. And the reality is it might be hotter in Montana than it is, in the Bahamas. They don't get 100-degree days. A hot day down there, even in the middle of the summer, at least out over the water would be, 90 degrees, 91 degrees. Now you combine that with some humidity and a lack of breeze, you're hot. Don't get me wrong. It's warm down there, and it certainly doesn't, it's not going to break 80 degrees at night. It doesn't cool off at night. But I would say that the summer season down there is one of the best kept secrets of the Bahamas for sure.
That's great. That's a good point too about the heat. And I had to laugh to myself when you said that you like to go down there in the summer because you can get away from work a little bit. I've traveled with the Yellow Dog staff before, and I don't know if there is such a thing. You guys are working all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. We do stay pretty busy in here.
Bonefish are the main target, so it doesn't require a lot of gear. But what are some of the things you recommend people bring? And I'll include flies in that. And I know I'm asking a big tire, and so that might be a tough question. But
yes, well, it's actually, let's put permit flies aside, because that is one deep rabbit hole that nobody's ever found the bottom of. But, for a lot of the gear for the Bahamas, it's incredibly simple. Most people, who are going to the Bahamas are really focused around bonefish, and, guys are fishing, I'd say the most common rod that guys are fishing is an 8. Some guys like to fish lighter rods than that. I personally don't. I kind of fish 8s and 9s for bonefish. And then whenever I go to the Bahamas, generally speaking, I'm bringing 8, 9, and 10. And the 10 weight, can do a variety of things. I've always loved fishing for big barracudas, and a 10 weight is, in my book, kind of the right rod for fishing for cudas. Just because most of the time you're fishing, a big needle fish or a big streamer pattern, and they throw a hell of a lot better on a 10 than they do, an 8 or a 9, and it pays to be able to. In a lot of cases, cudas have such great eyes that, it pays to be able to make a long cast to a cuda, and that, and stripping it back, if you make a short cast to a cuda, they'll see the boat and spook. So I like a 10. And then, you happen to bump into a tarpon, 10 weight's a great rod for that. You're in a permit friendly area, west side of Andros or Sandy Point or, Grand Bahama, 10 weight with a big heavy size 2 permit crab. It's kind of the right rod for that. To me, a 9 is one of the ultimate saltwater rods you could fish in the Bahamas. It can do a little bit of everything. It's heavy enough to be a really good permit rod, maybe not with your bigger size 2 super heavy crabs, but, more reasonable sized permit fly or a big bonefish fly with lead eyes in the wind, and 9 is just absolute money. We get, horror stories of people, oh, it was just so windy we couldn't fish, and, what were you fishing? Oh, I was fishing with my 7. And I couldn't get it there. You bump up to a 9 in the wind, you get a 15, 20 mile an hour wind. A 9 to me is the ultimate bone fishing rod, for that. And then an 8 weight, I certainly use my fair share of 8 weights still. And, I like having, several rods rigged up in the boat at the same time, just because, you get a shot of the big laid up barracuda, which happens all the time in the Bahamas. It's nice not having to, clip off your bonefish fly time. It's nice to just have stuff rigged up and ready to go for when those, fleeting shots, present themselves. For flies, it varies quite a bit between which specific area you're going to, but generally speaking, the gotcha is a killer. Places like Andros, it's just about all you need. I can't tell you how many times, I'm a fly tying nutcase, and I remember when I first started working for Yellow Dog and, got to go on my first visitation with Ian Davis, and we spent, almost 3 weeks running through Abaco and Andros, and I had a big pelican case that I had modified into a fly box, and just, I found out that I was going and just, sat down for a month and just, went crazy tying everything. And it was uncanny on Andros. You hand your fly box over to the guide. He's going to look through every single fly in there, and he's going to pull out the gotcha just about every time on Andros. I mean, every time. And it's to the point now where when I go to Andros, that's just about all I fish. I can't tell you the last time I've really fished, anything but a size 2 or a 4 gotcha on Andros. Certainly there are some areas that, some DIY spots on the ocean side where the fish are much sharper than they are, say, fishing way back in the bites or on the west side. where you do have to get kind of technical with your bugs. Maybe drop it down to a little size 6 crab pattern, or a little Vivercus mana shrimp, which is a killer pattern anywhere in the Bahamas. And maybe drop your tippet size down a little bit. That does occur. And then on some of the other islands, I got to go and fish the Berry Islands a few years ago, and just stayed at a little, hotel over there, and hired a fellow named Percy Darville, who's, kind of a living legend amongst guides. He's not super, super well known, but, he's been guiding for, 40 plus years, and really neat guy. I called him up to, book him for a few days. I'm like, "Hey, Percy, what do you want us to bring for flies?" And he's like, size 6 and 8, and, gotchas, and, stuff like that, puffs, small crabs. And I'm like, if you look at where the berries are in comparison to, say the jolters, I mean, that's maybe 30 miles. It's not that far. I'm like, man, how different can it be? I mean, what's Percy thinking calling for size 6 and 8 flies? I mean, I haven't heard of that really too much. Sure enough, I get over there, and those fish were brutally tough. And sure enough, just like Percy said, small flies were the way to go there. And then you go, 30 miles away, and the jolters, and they'll climb all over a size 2 gotcha. Why? I don't know. But, you definitely want to bring a little bit of variety in terms of the sizes, but, no matter where you're going, we can kind of get you dialed in with a good equipment list where, you're bringing what you need, not overdoing it with flies, if there is such a thing as that.
Yeah. That's great. And by the way, as I was waiting for my caffeine to kick in earlier in the podcast when I was talking about being at Andros. I've never been to Andros. I don't know why I said that. I meant Abaco. So I just wanted to clear that up, because I realized at the beginning of the podcast that I said I've only been to Abaco, and then I was talking about Permit on the west side. But that's fascinating about the flies, and it's funny that that's the outcome, but I guess so it goes.
Yeah, and then for tarpon, the tarpon that we bump into are in the Bahamas. It's they'll eat a lot of different. Take your pick as far as what pattern you want to throw, be it a toad or an EP bait fish or something like that. And wherever I go, I bring some muted colors like tan, some bright colors like chartreuse, yellow, orange, and then some dark colors, black, red and black, black and purple, things like that. And so some of the guides have some pretty, definite preferences on colors. For example, you go over and fish the west side with Benry Smith, he wants you to fish either chartreuse or tan, nothing else. That's all that exists to him. For permit flies, I would say that the vast majority of permit that get caught in the Bahamas are caught on a bonefish fly, just because that's what the guy has on his line when Mr. Permit, decides to swim by. A size 2 gotcha with some lead eyes is a remarkably effective permit fly, not only in the Bahamas but other places. But certainly, a dedicated permit rod in the Bahamas, your larger, heavier shrimp, patterns, be it a spawning shrimp or a mana shrimp. And then, a good supply of crab flies, kind of colored up to match the bottom, and then, weighted appropriately for, where you're fishing. I usually have a pretty good across the board, I mean, you could put a sticker on my permit box that says OCD on it. There's, literally everything in every single size, and it's a bit overboard, but it's nice to have when you do get a refusal and have time to change a fly. But, in all honesty, you go to the Bahamas for a week. Do you need 24 different permit flies in your box? No, you need like 6.
As far as getting there, I think I overnighted in Florida, but that wasn't necessary. Maybe Georgia, I can't remember. But what's what are some of the most common routes?
For sure, the Bahamas, being that it's right along the East Coast, is kind of a pretty easy decision for, anybody on the East Coast to get down there just because of ease of travel. Pre-COVID, there were direct flights from the States right to Freeport, Grand Bahama, right to Marsh Harbor, Abaco. I think we will see those come back in short order as we get more folks traveling down there and they continue to open up. But the main hub for the Bahamas is Nassau. And if you're going to the out islands, if you're going to Long Island or Crooked Island or anywhere on Andros, Nassau is the place that you fly first, and then take commuter flights over to those, various out islands. And that's, something that we can certainly help with, in terms of, which airlines and what schedules, and that information is not always super easy to find. Like you you type in the Expedia that you're going to Andros, they're going to tell you there's no flights, but rest assured there are flights.
Yeah, I ended up getting some help on my flights from an agent, and that's the way that made things a lot easier. Suddenly the flights were there. Well, terrific. This is great. I learned a lot. I've been there and I learned a lot. Where can folks learn more about or reach you and learn more about your services?
Yeah, the best place would be, to give Yellow Dog, a call here. I'm here just about every day, and then some, it seems like, and you can also, look up the Yellow Dog website, yellowdogflyfishing.com, and click on the Bahamas, and there's some navigation on there. Like, I'd like to learn more about this lodge. That email comes directly to my inbox, or, give me a call here at the office and discuss. I'm always happy to talk on the phone with folks too. I like talking better than typing. I'm better at it.
Well, terrific. Well, Doug, this was great. Thanks so much for your time, and it was certainly informative, and look forward to another chat again soon.
Thanks so much, Tim.
Thank you.